Welcome to Professor Game Podcast, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking, who brings the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I teach and work at IE Business School in Madrid, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Want to know more? Go to professorgame.com/subscribe, start on our email list, and ask me anything. Engagers, today we have somebody that I have met already in 2 conferences. We'll be talking probably a little bit about that. We had quite a few experiences together. But his name is Philipp Busch, and we'll see about his role in a few seconds, and it's very, very interesting. It's a different vibe that we will have today. But Philipp, before we get started, I need to know, are you prepared to engage?
Yeah, sure. Ready to rock.
Let's go. Let's do this. So first off, Dr. Philipp Busch works for GIZ since October in 2014. So it's going to be 5 years very, very soon. He got his master's degree in economics and geography at the University of Mainz, or I don't know if I pronounced that right.
Yeah, perfectly.
And then he continued studying to do his second master's degree on information systems and business administration. And recently, in spring 2018, he finished his doctoral thesis about gameful approaches in development cooperation. That's what I was mentioning before, that it's a very, very different approach that he has to gameful and gamification. And he's also teaching now gamification and agile methods at the University of Mainz. Philipp works at GIZ for the social innovation team in Cairo, in Egypt, to improve the situation for youths on the labor market in Egypt. Furthermore, he is the head of the GIZ component Serious Games to support the peace process in Yemen. So that sounds very, very exciting. Is there anything else that we left out of that intro that you would like to mention, Philipp?
Well, no, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
So, as I mentioned before, Philipp, we met in Chicago in the conference in GamiCon. We also met again at Gamification Europe in Amsterdam, and it appears that Philipp is currently again in Amsterdam today for this interview.
That's right, yes.
So, Philipp, can you tell us a little bit of what does the regular, I wouldn't even say day or week, maybe month look like for you? Because I know you travel a lot and your schedule looks like quite a bit all over the place. So can you tell us what your life looks like in general?
Sure, yes, of course. Well, as you just mentioned, there's not really like a regular day right now in my life, I would say, since due to my work, I have to travel a lot, or I'm allowed to travel a lot, let's put it like that. And normally a normal day is like I have breakfast in a hotel, and then it depends on the project I'm working on actually and in which city I am. So it might be that I go to the office at GIZ or to conferences, workshops, etc. So normally I'm abroad somewhere in a hotel going to work there.
I was going to ask you because you said the normal morning I wake up in the hotel. It's like, wow.
Yeah. Actually, right now it is like this. But apart from this, if I'm not working, I always enjoy as much time as I can at the sea. So it doesn't matter if it's like sailing, surfing, diving, or whatever. So everything that has to do with the sea, I love to do it.
Fantastic. And are you a cold water type of person, or are you on my side and you enjoy the warm waters in the Caribbean?
I enjoy the sun, I have to
Asia.
admit. Yes, I enjoy the sun, I have to say. Especially like sharing it with friends, of course. This is then the best time you can have.
I absolutely love the sea. I mean, it's one of the biggest things that I miss from back home. I could just jump in a car, and if I was lucky without traffic, I would spend 30 minutes in a car and sit down at the beach after 30 minutes or 40 minutes maybe. Again, without traffic, which was not often, but just to give you an idea of what it could look like.
True, yeah. I think this is somehow the place where you can, breathe and, create new ideas and stuff. Yeah, and just relax. I love it.
Absolutely. So Philip, as well as engagers, as you were hearing, Philip has a very different type of work with the gamification and gameful approaches. He uses it actually for things like development. He uses it for peace processes. So I think that we will be able to draw a lot of inspiration from what Philip has been doing in these years and what he's doing currently. So, Philip, the first thing that we would like to know is if you can tell us a story of what we'd like to call the favorite fail or first attempt in learning, where, you tried to do something, it didn't go the way you expected, it failed somehow. And of course, what did you learn from that? How did you come out from that failure and turn it probably into a success? Do you have such a story that you can tell us, Philip?
Yes, I think I have one. I think a few years ago, we worked together with different institutions worldwide on a MOOC on gamification, and so gamification to use in development cooperation. And somehow, we had, in our opinion, we had amazing ideas how we can gamify the whole learning experience of this MOOC. So MOOC is a massive open online course. So this virtual learning experience, we had amazing ideas how we can do it and how the people will be engaged and stuff. But then somehow we were limited. We found out later that we were limited by the usability and the whole UX design of the platform itself. So somehow it did not go hand in hand with our ideas, and we were somehow blocked by direct feedback that we wanted to give to the user, but we were blocked by the technology somehow. So we dreamed really big and then didn't really do the reality check if we can do it with our technology and with the platform. And so it was a failure in usability. And I think this was a big learning for me, that it's not only about like this gamification or usability, because everything there goes hand in hand. And it's all about the user-centered design. Everything we do there you really need to put yourself into the shoes of the user and see if the whole experience works out. So to check again on your project and to see if this whole thing works and is an experience on its own.
Yeah, and I think those are key learnings that you got from the user experience side. And I would also add, of course you met her as well at Gamicon and Jim Egan, Naomi Pariseau and Jim Egan at Gamicon. They were also limited by the platform. I must say that edX is a fantastic platform for many things, but for gamification, most of the MOOC platforms are not probably the best that you can get. The thing is that they started considering the platform from the moment that they started designing. So probably there, if you are going, I'm not saying limiting yourself by the platform, but use the capabilities and understand whatever platform that you're using. If you're going to use gamification within it, understand it as best as you can so that within those, again, maybe restrictions, we can call them restrictions, but the restrictions also are able to propel much of the creativity. They say that necessity is the mother of inventiveness. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So do the reality check, I would say.
Yes.
Because in this case, we dreamed big, right? We dreamed big, but at the end, it just didn't work out. And we fell in love with our own ideas, and that was the problem at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you if you had the chance to understand the platform better from the start, maybe you would have had, within those restrictions that they had, you would have probably made a greater course. However, of course, you were in love with what you did initially, which happens to all of us, and changing from that is a lot harder than starting from scratch sometimes. But it's really hard to say. I mean, it's easy to say, for me to say it now, like, oh, you just scratch what you did and start all over again. But of course, there's a lot of work involved. There's feelings involved. We're all humans. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yes.
So Philip, we should now probably shift like 180 degrees, and instead of going for a difficult time like that one with the MOOC experience that you had, actually go for something that is what you would call, I don't know, a success, something that you're proud of, whether it worked on the first or the 10th attempt. Can you walk us through how that process went? How you turned and as something that you had an idea in the beginning, and then how you turned that idea into a success again in gameful approaches and gamification. How did it go, and what did you learn from such an experience?
Yeah, well, I think the Yemen project is quite a nice example how something really works if you think it from the beginning as a whole experience. So in the Yemen context, we're in civil war, and of course, that's a very sensitive topic, especially to tackle those problems in social media, also in games. So what we're trying to achieve is spread a message of peace through the country. And we had a huge challenge in contextualizing our content, like the information that we want to spread throughout Yemen, the message of peace. It wouldn't work if we as Europeans just, create everything and try to put it into the market of Yemen and hopefully it works. So what we did was that we involved the Yemenis itself from the very beginning of the process. So our Yemeni, not partners, now they are friends. We had people all over different countries, over Spain, Netherlands, Germany, Yemen, Egypt, and we bring all them together from the very beginning to start these peace games. And of course, you have a huge cultural clash, not only in the art, the art style, but also in the way of game mechanics. You also have a huge clash of culture in project management after you came up with some ideas, and you need to take all of those variables into consideration. And the key of this was really the user-centered design and creating ownership among all the people involved in the project. I think it was only possible to make this a success because everybody on board was really 100% sure that we can achieve something. And this is my baby. And everybody thought so, or is thinking like this. We have a huge ownership in the whole project. The motivation of the people is just amazing. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic and like a very exciting project. Can you tell us a little bit more of like what were the objectives you set forth when you started this project and what it achieved? Because I understand from everything I've heard that it was a pretty nice success.
Yeah, exactly. So we first started with a pilot, so one serious game to be created on the market in Yemen, to be distributed in the Yemeni market, and to gain as much feedback as possible. And the main target of the whole project is to distribute the message of peaceful coexistence. So we are using those games. We now created 6 games that are all available on the Google Play Store for free, of course. We created those 6 games with different game approaches to reach out to different, target groups. This is basically the main objective, and we're tackling topics like human rights, good governance, gender, of course, peaceful coexistence, etc. And this is the main objective. We're using serious games to bundle those information and to spread the word in Yemen. At the same time, we're using different social media to promote the games, as well as though all those activities are getting supported by offline promotion, such as a game box that we're designing there, comics with the characters of the games, board games, as I said, or on the other hand, we're organizing a hackathon there that the community itself can create a game for peace as well. And a huge success, I would say, is that from the partners and the youth that we that we work together with for this project, they now created their own game studio in Yemen. So they are now creating games for peace on their own, to spread the word.
That's very, very nice. And those are some of the unexpected nice things that come up when you do a great project. And congratulations for that. I really think
Thank you.
It really sounds like you're doing an amazing job in helping, with such difficult situations as the one that they were going through in Yemen.
Yeah, but it's the people there, really. It's really the power and the engagement of our partners there.
Absolutely. And that's, of course, what also gives it cultural context. I mean, it's not the same to launch a serious game in Yemen than to launch it in, say, I don't know, I say Thailand. They don't have any of the same type of problems. But if you launch one in Thailand, it would be very different from the one in Yemen, which would be something completely different from one in Spain and completely different from something in the US, for example. In many things, in the context especially.
Yeah, I think the core dynamics are basically the same, like we're all human beings. We're all responding to, triggers, motivations. Neuroscience is very similar in all over the world, but the culture is a huge thing that you need to take into consideration when designing a game or a gamified system.
Absolutely, and that leads us beautifully into the next question that I wanted to make, Philipp, which is about the process that you use when you approach one of these problems that you find that you encounter and that you're going to tackle. Do you have any process, any series of steps that you take when you're going to approach one of these problems? How do you do it? Can you bring us into your process and let us know how it works for you?
Well, yes, of course. I think the most important thing is that it's really user-centered. I know it sounds flat, but you really have to put yourself into the shoes of the user. And if you can't do it, for instance, I can't put myself into the shoes of a internally displaced person in Yemen. So you need to get some of those people on board. This is really the main switch for success, I would say. And of course, there are different frameworks that allow you to do so. So, for instance, design thinking. We're using a lot of design thinking while we're creating the concepts of the games, the game design documents and stuff. But afterwards, we're also using agile methods such as Scrum or also Kanban boards and stuff. So all these kinds do help you quite a lot. But it is very important that you tailor those frameworks to your own needs. It's always only a starting point, not more. You shouldn't, like a dogma, stick to one because the book says so. You always have to tailor it to your needs.
That's fantastic. So I'm guessing that one of the main things that you do is center on that. People see how you can involve them, how you can get them on board, to understand them a lot better. And you use techniques like design thinking when you're creating. And after you understand your users, what would be the next step? How do you approach, for example, what are the mechanics that you use? How do you do those things? How do you bring them together? Do you find a narrative? Like what's the next step? How do you go about that?
Well, basically, you have to think, what do you want to achieve with it? So do you really want to go, do you want to go for a learning game? Do you want to spread a message? What is it that you want to achieve with your game? And perhaps I can say it here. Yeah, why not? So as you know, I wrote this PhD of Gamification and Development Cooperation and wrote quite a lot of frameworks and models how to apply gamification, but unfortunately it's in German. But this year I'm planning to translate those frameworks into a gamified learning quest. This means having different episodes of those learning quests, where in each episode one of the models and frameworks is being taught.
Nice. That sounds very, very interesting. Just a quick break before we continue. Are you enjoying this podcast? If you're listening through a podcasting app, please subscribe and rate us on the app. This will be of great help to reach more engagers so we can change the world together through gamification. And Philipp, now I wanted to go into what we sort of call the second part of this interview, where we go, instead of going for the stories and for all the nitty-gritty details, we go rather for sort of quicker answers, so to speak, because these are things tend to be more direct. So the first one is, if there's anything that you feel is sort of a good practice or something that any gamification or gameful approach would always benefit from.
Well, I think it's really to have a dive into psychology and neuroscience, because basically this is what gamification is. We are learning from games, right? So we're not playing games, we're learning from games and seeing how this can benefit our projects in the real world. If it's like projects in development cooperation or if it's learning, it's the same, it's always about psychology and neuroscience.
Yeah, using what we have learned from games and what games are doing well to understand those techniques and use them in other contexts as well.
Yeah.
Philipp, what would you say is your favorite game?
For PC or like a board game, or what do you mean?
It's up to you. You can say both of them if that makes it a bit easier.
Okay, let's see. Like for PC, I just love Witcher 3. So the story of Witcher 3, and that there's always something to do, and the whole story behind it. It's just amazing and has a lot of emotions in it. So this one's great. For board games, I love collaborative games, such as Pandemic Legacy, like those new approaches where you somehow destroy your own game, but through destroying it, you make it more fun. It's a very nice approach, I think.
By the way, you mentioned Pandemic, and it's something that I've been getting repeatedly recently, and especially since I got it for Christmas.
Really?
We played it a few times. What would be the expansions that you recommend the most? Because somebody asked it to me the other day, and I just have the basic game, and it's all I've played up until now.
Well, we just played it, and with my friends, we just played Pandemic Legacy Season 1, and we just started Season 2. But yeah, I love the approach that you all have to, collaborate with each other, and at the same time that your decisions from one game affect the future games.
Wow. That sounds very, very interesting. So Pandemic Legacy would be the one. And by the way, when you said PC or board game, that gives you away and says you're a PC gamer, not a console gamer, which is perfectly fine.
Yeah, both, I have to say. I also play consoles. I do them all.
I haven't played games on my PC for at least 4 or 5 years, I have to say.
Really?
Yeah, I have a Mac now, so it's harder.
We just discovered Sea of Thieves. The best 6 hours you can have.
Sounds like an exciting one. But Philipp, is there anybody that you would like to listen to interviewed in an interview like this one in Professor Game?
Well, I think, as I said at the beginning, or just some sentences ago, I think neuroscience and psychology would be great, because you almost had everybody here, I would say, on Professor Game, but I think, to broaden a little bit the spectrum here, or to think of a different perspective, like in neuroscience, there's a German guy who's amazing called Dr. Henning Beck. He's really doing great things on neuroscience. Then also regarding the perception of human beings, there's a guy wrote a beautiful book called Beau Lotto. The book was called Deviate: The Science of Seeing Differently. And I think, it's not only about games and game thinking, it's about the whole thing behind, the whole user-centered, the whole psychology, neuroscience behind it. I think we have to think of this perspective as well.
Yes, definitely. I do think that we should open up to these other things. By the way, you have to help me with the spelling of those names, because otherwise I'll probably never find them. My German is not 0, but it's probably like -1. So,
all right.
So, Philip, what you mentioned a couple of books from the people that you were talking about, and you've talked about books before. But if you had to recommend one book to the engagers, which book would you recommend and why?
Really, I would stick to this book called Deviate: The Science of Seeing Differently. I think this is an amazing book because it somehow crushes your way of perceiving the reality. Because you think that we can perceive the reality 100%, and even if we know that it's not true, this book really tells you that you only perceive the reality for like a few percent, and how you can make use of this, how you can also use this in your systems, and how this pushes creativity. I think it's a very beautiful book.
Sounds like a fantastic book. I had never heard of it, but it's my reading list is growing too high because each week I get a new book. But I do think it sounds like a very interesting addition to my at least my personal list.
Another reading, yeah.
So, Philip, what would you say is your superpower or your sweet spot when we talk about gameful design and gamification?
Hard to say something like this about yourself. But I think I might be quite okay in using gamification in different cultures, and especially, of course, in development cooperation.
Nice. Niche is very, very important, and it's exactly where people are able to shine, because it's the place where probably there probably isn't any other person who is actually doing that, and of course you will be the absolute expert in that field, and you'll be growing continually because I know you're doing it every day.
That's true, yeah.
So, Philip, then we have this sort of gamified kind of question where I get questions from the audience. Sometimes they let me know what their names are and they allow me to tell them. Sometimes they don't. And in this case, the question that we got comes from this person called Sawyer West. I hope you pronounced your name correctly, Mr. or Mrs. West. So the question is, are there any key weaknesses of gamification that, at least to your knowledge, have yet to be solved in any case study? What do you think of that?
Okay, this is in every case study, yes. I think there's a weakness, and I think it is the real impact measurement. Because we're having this in a lot of our projects where we use gamification and development cooperation. We have a lot of very, case studies, best practices and stuff. And the thing is really the true impact of behavior change is very, very hard to prove. Because it would be a lie if we say playing one of our games in Cairo or Yemen or wherever in the world really changes your behavior totally. It is a long process on behavior change. I think it's just a starting point. You start with self-reflection. Those games and all the gamification starts with a first kickoff. They kick you out of the door. They give you a self-reflection, but a long time impact measurement on behavior change is almost impossible with gamification or the case studies I know so far.
Nice. That's a very deep and interesting answer, and related especially to how we measure the impact of whatever it is that we're doing. And I think this applies perfectly and beautifully to gamification, especially because it's regularly questioned by others and by ourselves, because we're always figuring out what's the new thing that we can do. Because gamification, even though it's already been around for at least a decade, it's a relatively new thing to do. So there's many things that we're still figuring out and that we're still iterating on and that we're still learning from. And I completely agree that this applies to gamification, and it applies to many things because behavior change is applied to many, many fields. It's
always a mixture of a lot of different things and ideas you have and, perceptions that you get. You can't, like a behavior change that takes like 2 years, you can't narrow it back to only one interference with a gamified system.
Absolutely. So Philipp, thank you very much for being today with us in this interview. We would like to ask you if you have any final piece of advice. How can we connect with you? Maybe ask you future questions through, I don't know, social media or a web page, whatever it is you want to share with the engagers, with this audience, and then we'll say it's game over.
Yeah, sure. I think if you want to contact me, you can use LinkedIn, of course, as well. I think we can put it somewhere in Professor Game, right?
Yes, it'll be in the show notes for sure. You could just go to professorgame.com, you type Philipp with 2 P's at the end, and you will be able to find Philipp's webpage, because Busch, I think, will be a little bit harder to spell out.
Yeah, that's true. And furthermore, in the future, as I said, in 2019, I want to start this gamified learning quests on the different models and frameworks, how to use gamification in different cultures.
That's fantastic. Let's stay updated on what this initiative looks like and how it's advancing, and perhaps we can talk again 2019 or beyond and see how it's going and see how we can support you from here, from Professor Game.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for everything and having me.
Fantastic. It was my pleasure, Philipp. Well, I didn't get into any of the stories of when we met, but they're very interesting and will be perhaps for future episodes of Professor Game.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We had a lot of fun, that's for sure. Yeah, so Philipp, thank you again very much for being with us today. However, today it's time to say it's game over. Hey, engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Philipp. Do you have any questions that you would also like to ask to future guests? Then go to professorgame.com/question and ask your question. If it is selected, it will come up in a future episode and you will get your answer. And before you move on and click continue, would you like to know how to increase the performance of employees using gamification? Then you have to listen to Munch Lamb. So if you want to do that, subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.